Hey, welcome to Frank Talks, and I'm Frank, and delighted that you're with us this afternoon. And you are who?
I'm Jeff.
Oh, okay. Thank you for reminding me.
Hey, thanks, Frank. Hey, nice to see you. Hey, Frank, I wanted to talk a little bit. The question that we've got today is really about suffering and God. So let me phrase it and set it up a little bit for us, and maybe you can help us kind of unpack that a bit. So it really is centered on, God is so good, or if God is so good, why is there so much pain or hardship and suffering in the world? And I wanted to point to an example, and you can kind of help us fill that in a bit. I'm thinking of a book in the Bible, Job, which is about the guy Job. And to summarize it for y'all, he has a lot of hard things happen to him, right? He loses his wealth, he loses his family, his physical health. I mean, pretty much short of dying, right? And he's like fighting with God, really, of why is this happening? And at the end of the day, God's saying, hey, you don't know the plans that I have for you. And it's really it just emphasizes how much bigger God has in store, and we can't see that. But again, it's a horrible story for what Job goes through. We see a lot of suffering and pain in the world today. I think there's a lot of folks that can relate to it. So, Frank, what are our thoughts on that, on the suffering and the pain?
Yeah, I think understanding it is a challenge for all of us, because there is so much pain, there is so much suffering that's around, and you can't help but sometimes think, okay, God, what's the deal? You are, like you said at the outset, if God is really good, why is there so much bad? And it's been something that has been studied and talked about for centuries and centuries, for millennia. And theologians today call it theodicy, which is the struggle between this idea of God being good and why is there bad stuff happening. And it also ties in with this idea of providence, because one of the things that you hear Christians talk about is God's plan and about God directing us. And providence is the idea that God is trying to move us in a particular direction, but that direction is not forced upon us. It has to do with this concept that we've talked about, which is free will, right? And free will is about, I've got this ability to make a choice, good or bad. I can choose good, I can choose bad. And often in my life, I'll choose bad. And when I choose bad, there are consequences to that. And so we look at God and say, well, God, why did you make that happen? Well, God didn't make a lot of things happen. They're a result of human frailty, of choices that people make.
That's good. And so really then I'm guessing that ties into really God's love for us, right? He wants us to have a relationship and love him out of obedience, but he probably doesn't want us to be mindless robots and not have a choice to love him, right?
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this a little bit in one of the earlier Frank Talks, which you can go back and look at, by the way, right? But this idea that for a person to be able to love, you have to be able to choose. You love your wife, and you chose to love your wife. She could have paid you a bunch of money for you to love her, but that wouldn't be love, And God didn't make us as puppets where we're on a string and we're doing everything. If you don't have a choice, it's not love. And so for us to be able to love, we have to have free will, and free will opens the door to bad things that happen. And so much of it, like Job, we just can't understand, because it's way bigger than we can fathom, and the things of God are bigger than we can fathom, and we have to get ourselves at the place I do, where I have to trust that, there are things that I don't understand about God, but I'm not willing to give up on my faith in God just because I don't understand all the things there are to know about God. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But, I don't understand my wife, fully, Chrissy. She would say, I sure don't understand Frank, right? But we love each other anyway, because we've chosen to do that, and we deal with the consequences of bad things that happen in our lives, bad choices that we make all along the way.
Wow, and I love that example, and thank you for sharing that with your marriage, and I would say the same with Jen and I in our marriage. Kind of an illustration of God's love for us, right? We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, and whether it didn't take out the trash or whatever, we do bad things. We have a nature where we want to do self-fulfilling things.
Yep.
But God takes us back, right?
Yep.
I mean, always, and He loves us unconditionally as long as we're willing to, acknowledge Him and accept Him into our lives.
Yeah. And, people wonder about, like, hurricanes and tornadoes and lightning, even things like that. Well, why does that stuff happen?
Yeah.
People die all the time from that. And those are things that I don't understand. I can't understand those things. But it's not enough evidence to say, well, you shouldn't believe in God, because I believe in God because I know God in my heart because of my relationship with Jesus Christ.
No, nice. I love to hear that, Frank. That's so nice. What I want to say for the folks watching here, gosh, you're probably, if you're going through something hard or have hard times or anything like that, hey, please reach out and send us a DM or email us. Again, franktalkstuesday@gmail.com, because you may say, hey, I don't have questions, but I'm just going through a hard time. I want to talk to someone, or I want someone to pray with me or someone to pray for me, and we would love to be able to do that. Right, Frank?
We would love to be able to connect with you. And yes, use those avenues that Jeff just outlined. Reach out to us. We'd love to have the opportunity to visit with you in a one-on-one setting or through email, whatever. It would be our privilege to do so.
Great. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.